の言葉で不意に傷ついて、ごめんねも何もなく一人で自分励まして、今日もまた戻っては来ないかと不安で I just want you to stay。 この頃慣れてきたよその無口な態度に、そろそろ別れよと鏡につぶやくの、私がいて当たり前で君らしいね、だけど Stay, stay, stay with me。 切なく流れるメロディー、こんなに泣かせるのに、その香りは my felony。 でもまだ大好きで、この枕の空に吸い込まれちゃう前に、ねえお願いだからそばからも離れないでよ。どうしても君じゃなきゃダメなの、そばにいて Stay with me。 It goes a little something like la 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 la。 永遠ではなくてもいいからそばにいて Stay with me。 I said I wanted you to stay, but you're always leaving. Never tell me where, never tell me what's the reason. When you're gone, I can tell if my heart's even beating. Sometimes I think it's just for you that I live and breathe. So stay, I know you gotta be tired. When the night gets dark, let me be your fire. In a world full of lies, my only truth is you. Here's a letter from me to you. 切なく流れるメロディー、こんなに泣かせるのに、その香りは my felony。 でもまだ大好きで、この枕が空に吸い込まれちゃう前に、ねえお願いだからそばからも離れないでよ。どうしても君じゃなきゃダメなの、そばにいて Stay with me。 It goes a little something like la 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 la。 永遠ではなくてもいいからそばにいて Stay with me。 It goes a little something like la 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 la。 永遠ではなくてもいいからそばにいて Stay with me。
참 이상해. 분명 난 너를 너무 사랑했는데 모두 너에게 맞추고 널 위해 살고 싶었는데 그럴수록 내 맘속에 폭풍을 감당할 수 없게 돼. 벗고 있는 가면 속에 진짜 내 모습을 다 드러내. I'm the one I should love in this world. 빛나는 나를 소중한 내 영혼을 이제야 깨달아. So I love me 좀 부족해도 영혼을 사랑하고 싶어. In this world 빛나는 나를 소중한 내 영혼을 이제야 깨달아. So I love me 좀 부족해도 너무 아름다운 걸 네 원하신 love. 네 원하신 love. 네 원하신 It's just you and I, and no other guys. We got no interruptions, so we both feeling the vibe. Say I'm not your type, but I know what's on your mind. We can talk about nothing, or we can see what it's like. Don't lie, baby, don't lie. Here's a love never felt right. Switch sides and I'm beside you. This is alright. Too many eyes need a steady view. Smoking cigarettes at the rendezvous. Never meant to cross you. I'm not trying to fall, but I want to. Think I want to. You said the same love, but it's still the same love. Babe, love, anything to save ya. Don't be shy. You decide. Take it high. Make your mind. Don't lie, baby, don't lie. Here's a love never felt right. Switch sides and I'm beside you. This is alright.
but she just said ad-lib it and
ಮನ್ಸುಕದ್ದ ಮನ್ಮೋಹಿನಿ ಆಸೆ ಆತು ನಿನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಯ್ ಕೋಲಾರದ ಹಟ್ಟಿ ಗಣಿ ಕೋಗಿಲೆದೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಧ್ವನಿ ಕಾಳಿದಾಸ ಕಾವ್ಯ ನೀನೇ ನಿನ್ನ ರಾಜ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ರಾಣಿ ನೀನು ಪ್ರೇಮ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣವೇ ನಿನ್ನ ರಾಜ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ರಾಣಿ ನೀನು ಪ್ರೇಮ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣವೇ ಅರೆ ಅರೆ ಮುದ್ದು ಗಿಣಿ ಮನ್ಸುಕದ್ದ ಮನ್ಮೋಹಿನಿ ಆಸೆ ಆತು ನಿನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಕೋಲಾರದ ಹಟ್ಟಿ ಗಣಿ ಕೋಗಿಲಿದೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಧ್ವನಿ ಕಾಳಿದಾಸ ಕಾವ್ಯ ನೀನೇ ನಿನ್ನ ರಾಜ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ರಾಣಿ ನೀನು ಪ್ರೇಮ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣವೇ ನಿನ್ನ ರಾಜ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ರಾಣಿ.
Welcome to the ISM Youth Files Project Event, Words of Wellness.
Hello to our audience here at Cures Comedy Theater, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube live stream, we're your hosts. I am Femina Lopez.
Lulu Kashi Wabara.
and Olivia Chisire.
We come to you from Portland, Oregon, which has the 9th largest urban Native American and indigenous population in the country, with 380,000 nations represented in Oregon.
The Chinook lived on ancestral lands now in the Portland region all the way to Oregon City, on the east side of the Willamette River. The west side of Portland through to Sobeys Island were the lands of the Multnomah people. On the west hills were the lands of the Tualatin and Kalapuya peoples.
We recognize them and their connection to the lands where they lived and traded and gathered native foods, such as the Wapato potato. These foods sustained them and were traded as well as fish from the Columbia River. These are the ancestral lands that were taken from them in what we now call the Portland metro area. We acknowledge the policies of genocide and environmental racism and the relocation that was part of the history of Portland.
Today we present the ISM Youth Files and Words of Wellness. It is a writing and broadcast project from youth writings about health, and MediaRites has selected 20 essays, poetry, and graphic novels in e-book to be published later this year. The project includes 4 parts broadcasts that will launch later nationwide next year.
MediaRites is a nonprofit multimedia organization led by Dime Lowe Roberts, working with associate producer Samson Searath and production manager Amanda Anderson. This book is co-edited by Sandra DeHelen, and the podcast will be engineered by Clark Salisbury. The project's mental health consultant is Dr. Eleanor Gill Kashi Wabara.
After the intermission, Eleanor will be moderating a talk with youth mental health professionals, so stay tuned, and we have been collaborating with Oregon Children's Theater's Blake Wells on this event, and Nick Condon on a mental health toolkit, which we are launching today, and will be available free. Just follow the QR code on the program and on the screen.
The mental health toolkit is free, includes information and resources for youth, families, and schools, and community groups. Today we are live streaming on YouTube, and we will hear from the writers selected all over the country and from India. And some are here in Portland. And some will join us from via video. We want to take a moment to thank our funders.
Let's give them a round of applause, especially, yes, Recruit, who was the first to fund this project. We also want to thank Marcy Croson, the outgoing artistic director of Oregon Children's Theater, for her, yes, applause, woo! For her offer to partner on this event and mental health toolkit. Our first writer, Kylan Hattie-Luco, comes to us from Springfield, Minnesota. She writes about her life and challenges for Native American family and community.
Hello, Dakiapi. Wachiakapi Kinwashe. Washichu iya, Kailen Imakiapi, Ka Dakota iya, Zikada Shawia, Indemie. Damakota, Kamalakota, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Mataham, Ka, Springfield, Edwati, Naku, Springfield, Ed Matumpi. Pidamai. Hello, my relatives. I hope your day is good. My white name is Kylan, but I prefer the Lakota way of saying my Indian name, which would be Zikala Shawia. This means red bird woman, aka cardinal woman. I am Damakota from Chanchayapi, Lower Sioux, Morton, Minnesota. I grew up there. Malakota, my family is from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Oglala, Lakotas, and I live in Springfield. I was born in Springfield. So basically, I'm here to talk about my piece. My motivation for my piece was basically that I have the power to help other people. I believe that I've went through very difficult situations that I can declare myself a strong and intelligent and a beautiful woman because of the things that I went through. And I could say that I felt very alone when I went through these difficult times. They made me feel like I had no one. And I know that I'm not the only person who feels that way. Because there are still times that I feel that way. I get really depressed and I think that nobody's here for me. But in reality, there are plenty of people there for you.
That was Kylan Hattie-Luco, a writer for the ISM Youth Project. We have some of the Portland writers with us today, and we'll be presenting them with a certificate. I'm proud to introduce the next writer, Mila Kashi-Wabara, who's also my sister. Mila is 11 years old and will read her piece, My Mental Health Journey.
Hi, I'm Mila Kashi-Wabara, and I'm 11 years old. Lately, I've not been feeling like myself. At the most random times, I'd start bursting out into tears. I have an urge to clench my fists, and I just want to hit something. I say, I can't, and I don't know what I can't do. I just know that I can't do anything. I don't know how I see hope in all the darkness, but I do know that my mom tells me I'm okay and that I'll get through it. But I also like to read an enthusiastic book called Friends Forever. It's based on the author's life in 8th grade. Throughout the book, it shows her trying to be perfect or beautiful, but at the end, she has to come to terms with the realization that she just has to be enough for herself. We also see her go through a lot of depression. The book shows me that I'm not alone, and that gives me hope. I know I would help a friend or a loved one, I just don't know how. I've not had a lot of friends go through anxiety, fear, or them being stressed out. I am aware of one of my friends is always very stressed out with things like homework and getting things done in time. When things like that happen to her, I decide to leave her alone. I just need to let her do her homework and cool down. I give her the gift of space and respecting her feelings. But if it seems like someone is sad, I would usually try to cheer them up. In these cases, I think it would be the most helpful thing to leave them alone. I actually go through anxiety myself. Sometimes I have a fear of running out of oxygen, and I always get very anxious when I don't have my water bottle with me. I have panic attacks, shortness of breath. At first I thought it was a medical issue, but whenever I did not have my water bottle on hand, the bad things I thought would happen never happened. Since my mom is a psychologist, I know a little bit about what anxiety was. My mom saying she was worried made me worry. It took me a little over a year to come to the realization that I might need some help controlling my anxiety. My mom thought it was a good idea for me to get a therapist, and so did I. I thought it would be really awkward, but I knew my mom knew what she was doing. It took us a while, but then we found the perfect therapist for me. Since I'm a person of color, Asian and Latina, it was important to have a therapist as color as well. And we did not see any. I was a little worried, but we ended up finding a great therapist who is Asian like me. Although I was a little scared and embarrassed at first, because I was going to tell someone I didn't really know things I hadn't told anyone. Plus, there have always been stereotypes in shows and in books that taking therapy was bad and humiliating. Also, hearing people make jokes about it didn't help at all. But she ended up being great. She has given me a lot of tips about my anxiety that has really helped. So I learned that therapy really does do something, and I'm very grateful.
That was my sister, Mila Kashiwabara. Here, your certificate. And how hard was it to write a piece about mental health and just navigating that for you?
I think, I don't think it was that. It wasn't too difficult because it was kind of just like writing into my journal a little, except other people were going to be reading it. So I don't know, but I did have to think more about my grammar usage, but that I think was the hardest part. But I think I was happy to share my mental health journey because I want people to know that they're not alone and that other people go through the same things as them and they're not weird or anything.
Well, thank you so much, Mila. We really liked hearing you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. MediaRites heard from more than 40 writers about their mental health journeys. Of the 20 who were selected, many stories reflect the challenges from the pandemic. Next up, we present all the way from Kolkata, India, essayist Adrija Jana, and from Tacoma, Washington, poet Catherine Elliott.
In all this time, I could not possibly ignore what was happening in the outside world. With more than 300,000 COVID cases in India per day, no number of helping hands could be too many. So I volunteered as a support person and helped hundreds of patients find hospital beds, oxygen cylinders, blood supply, food home delivery, and placed newly orphaned children or children with parents hospitalized in temporary child care centers. In the daytime, I managed the household, my studies, and took care of the family. And at night, when everyone was asleep, I took night shifts to help the COVID victims.
Hello everyone, I'm Adrija Jana from India and I currently graduated from high school. I'm currently 18 years of age and today I'm going to talk about my piece which is a part of the ISM Youth Files. It is called The Evolution. I wrote this piece towards the end of 2021 when my family and I were just coming out of all of the health, mental and financial turmoil that we had been through during the pandemic. And I had to handle and manage a lot at that time. So throughout the time, this was weighing on me. It was weighing on my heart. And since a very young age, writing is something that I have been very, very fond of. So unable to talk about my experiences to anybody else, I decided to talk about it with my closest and most trusted friend. That is my journal. When I wrote The Evolution, I never thought that it would be published somewhere or I would share it with another soul ever. But later on, I came across MediaRites ISM Youth Files essay writing opportunity. And after going through what they had done, I thought that this was a safe platform for me to share my writing. By then, I also knew that there were many people who had been through similar, if not worse, experiences during the pandemic. And if what I had been through and my experiences and my writing could give anybody even a bit of hope to hold on to, even a bit of courage not to give up, then why not? Which is why I decided to go ahead and share my work with MediaRites, and it came out as one of the winners. But that is not what is most important to me. What is important to me is that my work will reach other people and will probably be able to help them. That is the thought that holds the most meaning for me and makes me very, very happy. So I thank MediaRites once again for giving me this opportunity. Dimay has been such a great support throughout this entire process. And I thank all of you for listening to me today here. Thank you again for the opportunity and everything else.
You are a mirror, reflecting and helping others recognize themselves, but never truly getting to have a voice yourself. Resolution: the best and most honorable actions of one never get attention or praise. And if you need to be reminded, sometimes it's okay to cry. Sometimes it's okay to have feelings, and sometimes it's okay to not be okay. No matter how many times you are pushed down, always get back up.
Hello, my name is Catherine Elliott. I'm 16 and I'm from Washington. I wrote the poem called Singularity, and it was mostly about me talking about feelings of isolation during the pandemic and how normal it was to be alone. And I really wanted to express that those types of feelings were very valid, especially during quarantine. And it was also for my English class. I submitted it for a project, and I think that it was a good opportunity to also share with other students, that they're not alone through this.
Even before the pandemic, youth were experiencing or had experienced some type of trauma. But according to the CDC, COVID-19 had a seismic effect on communities across the country, and young people have been especially impacted. Nearly 50% of all Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, BIPOC, as well as the LGBTQ+, suffer from mental health issues. This percentage has increased as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. With us today is 12-year-old Ella Selko from Portland, Oregon, who sent MediaRites her graphic novel, Smile. I'd like to introduce Ella Selko, the creator of Smile. Would you like to tell us about your graphic novel?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you create it?
I created my graphic novel to spread the message that when you're going through difficult times, that you're not alone, and to stay strong and not give up, and you can always ask for help.
Do you want to describe each page of the graphic novel?
Yeah. So the first page, the story starts off with the main character in a Zoom class, feeling overwhelmed by negative thoughts and insecurities, including terrible events in the news. In the second page, the main character gets a text from her quote-unquote best friend and finds out it's about wanting to end their friendship.
Okay.
In the third page, the main character is devastated by what her friend did and acted out in frustration. Then one of her dads comes in to the room. In the fourth page, she sees the damage she did to the pot she knocked over, and in tears of frustration and anger, she turns around and hugs him. And later they talk about what will make her feel better about herself. In the fifth page, on On the last page, there's a message that I wanted to spread. There's the message that I wanted to spread through the story. And yeah.
Thank you, Ella, from MediaRites. Here's your certificate. You can go. Okay, and now I want to introduce DeAndre Avant from Boston, Massachusetts.
Everyone sees a 6'2" male dancing down the street thinking he's the happiest lucky guy on the planet, when in all reality, I'm dancing the pain away from the negative energy this pandemic has put on to oneself, hoping that one day the world can return to a safe, normal, where people's rights are respected. Equality can be a must instead of an option, where millennials aren't telling the people who come after them what's possible versus what's not, creating families with positive morals rather than broken up family mentalities. This pandemic is a bar graph in my life and will continue for who knows how long. Next year's hope for me are that we continue improving our human society while also being safe physically and mentally. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever, on whatever time this is. My name is DeAndre Avant. I am 21 years old, and I am from Boston, Massachusetts. And the piece that I had submitted within MediaRites was called Pandemic 2021. Because during the time of when I was writing this piece, it was during 2021. My motivation for writing this piece was to share my story and honestly inspire others during a really crucial time in so many people's lives during the pandemic. In fact, the pandemic is still even happening, maybe not as heavy as it was during 2020 and 2021, but it's happening, and there's definitely an effect. But there's positive benefits and there's negative benefits. I was lucky enough to be able to have a little bit of both, more positive anything than negative, but still, that was my motivation for writing this piece. And MediaRites was an opportunity I heard about from my boss at the nonprofit organization that I work at, and he was the one who had recommended me to do this opportunity to share my story and let others hear and feel inspired to, keep moving forward even during the difficult times. And the most important thing about this piece is that because it's my story, others are listening. And I don't want to sit here and preach to everyone or try to seem like I'm a leader when I may not be, but I hope that in terms of this meaning to you guys of reading my piece and hearing what I'm saying, that you understand that we all have a different story and all of our stories are different. Not all of them are similar and not all of them are the same, but they're our story. And that's what truly counts. Thank you, MediaRites, for this opportunity. And thank you, D-May, for allowing me to be able to share my piece with you, have that interview with you. And here's just the thank you video. You guys take care.
We heard from writers around the country and about how the act of writing down one's feelings could help them deal with what they were going through during the pandemic. We now present two writers who don't know each other, but from the same state, Connecticut. Jonia Masick and Ruli Morello from New London with their poetry.
This has been an emotional year, to say the least. My dad is a nurse. He doesn't talk about it really. It reminds me of what my grandmother said about her father who fought in World War II. Always thought that kind of trauma would be our great-grandparents' scene. I don't think people really realize that we live through shared history.
Hi, my name is Jernia. I'm from Mystic, Connecticut, and I am 17. My piece for the ISM Youth Files was COVID. We went through that. The reason I wrote COVID, we went through that, was originally to be used in a play. It never was used, but it was written for the intention to help people and myself process COVID and going through a pandemic and being trapped inside and having so much overwhelming fear of your loved ones and for yourself and just the unknown, of course. We all went through that, so I know you know what I'm talking about. And the piece it holds for me now, it turned into me wanting to write it to help a friend and to help me process, and then it unfolded into this a brilliant story that I used to continue to process my time in the pandemic. I came back to it after a little bit, and a lot of stuff, a lot of fear just got out onto the page for me, and it was this really lovely awakening and lovely release from all of the emotions stored up. And it holds such a special place in my heart because I made it for friends originally, and I made it in a place, Writer's Block Inc., that I can call like my second home. And I made it at the end of the day for myself, and it became a part of myself. And I feel so proud to have it out there because everything you make is an extension of yourself. So, yeah.
My youth has been robbed from me because I'm unable to get up, to get out of this bed, trapped by these four walls, my desolate room, surrounded by dirty clothing landmines. Mom circles back to drop the mind-blowing revolution that my room is a mess, but doesn't seem to notice that I am a mess. My life is a mess. The whole world is a mess, so why do you draw the line at my room? Well, I definitely changed more over COVID, so it is still kind of different, especially with seeing people, fighting their own battles and their own private battles, and then they're different too, so it's just different, really. Like, I remember, I haven't seen this friend in since COVID, and I remember they always used to be bright and cheery, and then after COVID, they're more like, just quiet and don't talk much. I'm like, what happened? It's like, I don't know. I'm just like, okay. And then we're not, there's not bright as cheer anymore. So I'm like, okay. Yeah, for sure. People, I just feel like people don't always know how to deal with those problems. And I know the school tries to help, but it's not always making a difference. I'm not sure there's someone you really can see. I know the guidance counselors, but they're primarily helping you with your classes and your graduation requirements and what colleges you're going to. I would say don't be afraid to reach out first off, and really just to work through your own thoughts. You always think something for a reason. If you're thinking horrible thoughts, you should think, why am I thinking like that? And then really get to the root of that issue. Even with this poem, I was thinking, I don't really like school. Now I'm thinking, why don't I like school? I feel unfulfilled, so maybe I should just write about it, and that'll fulfill me more.
And now I would like to introduce you a poet who lives here in Portland. Caitlin O'Neill is 16 and is in the 11th grade at Oregon Espargaro School. She entered 2 poems for the ISM Project book, and both were accepted. Today, she will be reading her poem, Taken for Granted.
Hello, I am Caitlin O'Neill, and this is my poem, Taken for Granted. For the past 2 years, I took it for granted. I'll admit, I took it for granted, it being the friendly greetings in the halls, it being the smiles on faces too familiar to forget, it being the hustle and bustle of crowded streets under sunlit clouds, it being the delicate touch and physical energy of others, it being the group photos with messy hair and imperfect smiles, the sense of security in our communities bonded by steel-made cables, and finding comfort in the presence of people who make up the mechanics of our memories. Yet, we rarely stop to think. Think about what we've lost and endured, but lost isn't simply something misplaced. Rather, the experience is never to be had, the forgotten joy of others and the people we can never get back. And endured can never hold the weight of how we had to survive on LED-lit screens, mental health so fractured that a broken vase seems more put together, and periods of isolation spanning what seemed like eras without beginning or end. As time went on, pieces of my life began to chip away, like how a sandcastle breaks down upon the shore. Waves take their course and wither away each pile of sand, trying so hard to stay together despite the harsh winds and crashing waves. The tower, once tall, dwindles down to nothing more than an abandoned pile. But despite cracks, crevices, uneven arches, and slanted walls, we still rebuild. Our once uneven arches become sturdy and solid. Our slanted walls become adorned with beauty and hope. Our days spent inside become days spent with friends. Our anxiety-ridden worry eased by the safety nets of people we love. Our self-isolation welcomes the physical contact of others with open arms. What was once a majestic palace, fallen, only to be reconstructed again. Now, as we find ourselves discovering this new normal, filled with those familiar faces, crowded spaces, hugs, and handshakes, we can't help but to appreciate the world a little more. The transformation of our lives, but this time for the better, almost as the world blooms from the remains of isolated dust, blooms from strides as a community, blooms from our strength, blooms from what we've lost, blooms from our hope, blooms into the world we are rediscovering one step at a time. And I will never take it for granted again.
Thank you, Caitlin. What made you write this poem?
Yeah, so this poem was in collaboration with Danceability through STEPS PDX, and in June we were able to put on a performance where the Danceability dance troupe was able to interpret my poem with the dance, which was an awesome experience getting to work with them and see my words translated into movement. And so this piece was from my perspective of really my reflections of what had happened throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and just through my words, and it was awesome getting to share that with everybody and you here.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. It was a beautiful poem. Thank you. And now we will hear from two other poets. Kenona Bartz, also from Portland, but has already started school in North Mount Harmon in Massachusetts. MediaRites also selected two of her poems. And we will hear from Eric Nelson, an 11th grader at Church Hill High School in Livorno, Michigan.
My name is built on an uneven middle, 5,000 kilometers farther from one dusty half. It is not who I am. It is not the magnificent cities of ice, the bustling chaos and noise, the knowledge my ancestors were proud of. It is not where I'm from. 齐齐哈尔, Shanghai, 第11楼的公寓. My name is the one secure connection, bridging me to two separate worlds. The last reminder that I belong to Chinese family gatherings, where they speak to me in fluent Mandarin.
Hi, my name is Kiona Birch. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I am 16 years old. I wrote two pieces of poetry titled A Wish for Rain and Fault. At the beginning of the poetry unit in my English class, my teacher assigned us to write a poem about our names. I knew immediately that I wanted to use my name to explore the disconnect I have with my mom's family and culture. Through writing A Wish for Rain, I have a better understanding of my own relationship with Chinese culture and am more motivated to improve my Chinese. I was motivated to write fault as a way to process my emotions, since I don't look back at my childhood that often. As I started to write about it, I found that the words just flowed, and I didn't have to edit the poem too much to get to a place where I was happy with it. I ended up reciting this poem in front of my English class, and this vulnerable experience helped me acknowledge what happened and begin to move forward. I hope that sharing these poems encourages other people to also share their stories. Thank you.
I walked, then stopped, and looked about the street, with nothing gripping my gaze on concrete, my body's own soul left behind my feet. My mind, it was split, but my thoughts complete. I didn't leave much in that appalling place. Indeed, I wouldn't think twice to go erase words or wishes that my own face had written on this solitary space. Back then, I needed not care for a thing. Youth blinded me from sorrows that life bring, which follow me everywhere I go and cling. Now memories of my earlier days sting. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm from Livonia, Michigan. I'm 17 years old, and the work I wrote is titled Lost. I've always been an overthinker, and that could be a slippery slope. Instead of focusing on the past or the future, my poem is meant to praise staying in the present moment. I'm very proud of this poem, not only because it tells a story that really resonates with me personally, but also because I love experimenting with different rhyme schemes and metrical descriptions in my poetry, and I feel like this poem is an excellent example of that.
Bodies. We don't have to be in a bad place before we reach out for help. Just like an athlete works with a coach or trainer when they're in great shape, we can work on our mental health with a counselor or therapist. Next up, I want to introduce Portland poet Kara Chen, a student at Lake Ridge High School. She's previously published her poetry in Tripping the Zine Fantastic. She will now read her poem selected for the ISM project. It's titled Homesickness.
Homesickness, longing for a place you aren't sure exists. I'm home, I say to myself, in this box of a room with its lilac walls, the exact shade I'd picked out when I was 6. I'm home amid the tangle of cobwebs clinging to the fan stubbornly with the strength foreign to me. Or maybe not, because sometimes I hurt so much I think I must be both the strongest and the weakest person in the world. I'm home in a library that smells like old chips and mildewed carpets, amber crystal light slanting in from the windows, and a skylight never cracked open. Those shelves, endless to a child, seem to shuffle closer as I grow. Or maybe it's just my hopeless imagination. I'm home, I say, to a house too empty for my soul, a house that, if given the chance, would swallow me up, teeth and hair and all, until there was nothing of me left for myself. Maybe this is home, I say, my words echoing, tinted lilac and suffused with spider silk. Maybe this is home, this place where, if you aren't careful, could become so much of you that you forget how to be anything else. Reasons why wanderlust exists.
Thank you so much for your poem. I just want to ask, what was your motivation to write Homesickness?
This was in October of 2020. It was my birthday and I was feeling very lonely and I just couldn't sleep that night. And it was probably like 2 a.m. in the morning and I just wanted to write about loneliness. And so this poem was actually the middle part of like a 3-set piece about loneliness. And I feel like sometimes your 2 a.m. thoughts are your most honest ones.
Yeah, for sure. No, I feel that. Well, thank you so much. Here's your certificate. Yeah, great job. Once youth started going back to in-person school, some had challenges adapting for crowded classrooms again. Trini Fang is a high school senior in suburban Illinois. She's the co-editor-in-chief of Renaissance Review, an online literary journal. In her essay, How We Speak Our Truths, she describes the shock of going back to school after online learning.
My school crowds 1,500 teenagers into a few hallways and a roundabout or two. Stepping into the building on the first day back felt like I had plunged headfirst into sensory disarray, competing with 1,000 different stimuli from 1,000 different directions. It was hard to feel completely at ease. I re-entered life more confident than I had been before, but there were still times when I wanted to shrink away, when there was so much happening that I didn't know how to properly comprehend. Sometimes I found myself reaching for the online communities I had discovered. At these times, I appreciated the slowness, the rehearsal of the messages we sent. It was a reprieve from the breakneck pace the rest of life had taken on. Hi, my name is Trini Fang. I currently live in and am from Crystal Lake, Illinois. I'm 17 years old, and the name of the piece that I wrote for the ISM Youth Files is called How We Speak Our Truths. I was really motivated to write this piece based on the social anxiety that I felt after the COVID pandemic and how that intertwined with kind of the slight discrimination that I experienced in my community and how that contrasted between my online community and my in-person community, the city that I live in. To me, my piece means a lot about how we can find different ways to communicate with each other, and it also speaks a lot to my values about mutual respect and really trying to give each other space even if we don't completely understand each other's situations. How We Speak Our Truths, again, is a piece that means a lot to me because it is a memoir about my own personal experiences. And it helped me kind of come to the conclusion in the end myself that I need to be able to speak up more and better communicate with others in order to really find true meaning in our interactions. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce another poet who came to us via the youth chapter of Willamette Writers. Freya Sticka is 15 years old and living in Portland. She sent us her poem and this painting she created. Freya, would you like to read your poem? Sure. Nothing?
And I said, "Mama, are these walls real? Mama, are these windows really clear? Hush, hush, the sun is only rising. Mama, Mama, the sun doesn't hear the footsteps in my chest. Hush, hush, your breath is as warm as the summer rays. Mama, Ma, I'm in the shade. Hush, hush, how could you be so distant? You're right here. Ma, I don't know. Hush. Ma, I can't feel my skin. Hush, it simply isn't there. Ma, has it ended? Already has. Ma, please, I'm not here yet. Ma, take me home. Ma, please, I really don't know. Mama, please, I don't know a thing. Mama, I am but a child. Yet your body has grown? I don't know. Is it really just me in this world? Maybe. Not even you are in this world. You're not my ma. Who are you? Why does that matter? Who are you? I am you. But you said there is no me. Yes. Who am I? Depends. I don't know. I have no body, no brain, no heart. Maybe. There's nothing? No, there is nothing. I don't understand. Not even nothingness can exist in this world. The sun is setting. I don't want to leave yet. What could you be leaving? What do you mean? There's nothing left in this world for us. What about the walls, the windows? What walls? What windows? There was no reply. None was needed. For this silence is who I am, who I am. This is why the windows' walls sync with the footsteps in their chest with mine. Our bodies are not who we are, simply what defines who we are. Our thoughts and emotions are not who we are, simply what paves who we are. Who are we? We are the witness, the spirit. Before I knew it, the sun had set. Everything was no longer nothing, nor something.
Thank you. Thank you for reading your personal poem and your beautiful painting. I think you'll relate to the next two videos. Next up, MediaRites has selected two graphic novels that spoke to the expectations of Asian American culture and its effects on them. Genevieve Bascos Eres is a Filipino-American freshman at Dulles High School in Sugar Land, Texas. Her graphic novel is titled Consequences of Culture. Danica Leung is a recent graduate of Lincoln High School in Portland and is already starting her freshman year at Emory University. Her graphic novel is titled Good Girl.
I think especially for Chinese Americans who come from a collectivist culture in which it's very taboo sometimes to speak out against dominant thought, or where we're kind of faced with the model minority myth where we have to be high performing in order to belong. It's I didn't have the language that I have now to be able to understand the feelings I was having, the resentment I was feeling. And therapy was super, super helpful to be able to really put a label on what I was feeling and to articulate the complex mess of emotions that I was feeling then and even now. I mean, I had a therapist appointment this morning and it went great. So I think therapy is so beneficial to really just make you feel like you're not alone, I think. I think when you experience these things in your head, you're like, no one else has ever felt this way. No one else could ever possibly relate. But then when your therapist tells you that it's actually very common, it's just called imposter syndrome or it's called whatever else, it helps you make you feel like you're not alone. It helps you learn ways to cope with it. And it gives you a space to process your emotions in a way that's just not possible with anyone else. I'm Danica Leung, I'm 18 years old, and I'm located in Portland, Oregon, and my piece, Wild Geese, is about coming to terms with the fact that at times I was really not okay. From my background, there's a lot of pressure culturally, socially, to perform at a extreme level, to be extracurricularly, academically, socially excellent in a way that's just not sustainable. And coming to terms with the fact that I was suffering from mental illness, that I was suffering from these social pressures, was something that took a long time for me to accept, and even longer to understand that I wanted to seek help out for that. But the process of recovery has been super rewarding, and I feel like I'm getting ever so much closer to this elusive idea of wellness and being mentally healthy. I think being mentally healthy is, in a way, about radical acceptance. It's not about the goodness of a life situation. It's about understanding and being okay with where you're at, where you're going to be, and where you've been. And it's about being able to feel the full spectrum of emotions while knowing that you have the coping mechanisms to get through any of them, to be able to enjoy the good moments and mourn the bad ones, and to know that a better future is on the horizon.
So rule 1, do not be heard, you must be obedient. What I meant by that is growing up in a very discipline-based home curriculum, we were kind of forced to shut out that creativity as well as speak only when we're told to. Rule 2, study, you must be smart. Being an Asian, it's very easy to fall into the rabbit hole of I need to get perfect grades, I need to excel academically. Rule 3, float, you must not drown, a good girl solves her own problems.
Hi there, my name is Genevieve Vasquez Arce, I am 14 years old, and I live in Houston, Texas. I am the illustrator for the art piece, The Consequence of Culture. My purpose in creating The Consequence of Culture was to offer solace to those who believe that they are bound to the expectations forced on them. You see, given Asian culture, it's almost like a competition where we must race to meet the deadlines of a worthy daughter or son, which is very overbearing and it's a heavy burden to carry sometimes. And the meaning to me? Well, I've never really thought of it like that. Well, the meaning to me is something that we find together.
Foundation is absolutely everything. This impacts everyone because culture is our painting set, but we are the painters. The colors were given to us, but we have the capability to create something authentic and beautiful. Yours plus my ethnicity and culture are landscapes where we are free to roam.
In the mental health toolkit created with Oregon Children's Theater, there was a shout out to Project Lotus. It's a peer-led resource working to destigmatize mental health in Asian American communities. For more info on their project, it can be found at www.theprojectlotus.org. Several of the pieces MediaRites selected spoke of the importance of getting mental health therapy. Isabel Santana just graduated from West High School in Torrance, California. She recently received the title of Los Angeles Youth Poet Ambassador. The pandemic had a detrimental effect on her mental health, and that almost ended her life. She writes about it in her essay, More Than a Joke.
As basic as it sounds, I know in my heart that recovery is possible and so worth it. My whole life, I've been told that I have a bright future ahead of me. I used to be unable to see it. I used to toss my life around, not caring about what happened to me. Suicide used to be my comforter, even though it destroyed me. I will fight to raise awareness from suicide and change the way it is used in conversation. Life will get hard again. I know that. This time, however, instead of staying stuck in my hell, I will rise. I will learn to love life again, and I will live.
Hello everyone, my name is Isabella Santana. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Torrance, California, and this is the story behind my piece, More Than a Joke. So, More Than a Joke is a really raw and vulnerable piece. My main motivation behind it was to change the way we talk about suicide in our society. As someone who dealt with suicide, as someone who struggled from suicide ideation and attempted suicide multiple times, I noticed that our society has a tendency to talk about suicide in a very relaxed and almost jokey way, and I realized that wasn't okay because suicide is not a joke. It is not something funny. It is not something to just plop into a conversation like it's nothing. To me, More Than a Joke is a hallmark of my growth. More Than a Joke is based on my experiences with suicide ideation from when I was 14 to when I was around 17. And I wrote More Than a Joke when I was about 17 and a half. I guess it goes to show how much can change in just a couple months. I went from being this super depressed, hopeless girl to someone who had hope for her life and saw something in the future. And I think More Than a Joke played a huge role in that. More Than a Joke is my little baby. It's my little masterpiece. It's the product of all my trials and tribulations. More Than a Joke is the piece that shows how I changed my life. And I hope that hopefully it can change other people's lives too.
The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24 hours for people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. The number is 988 or text HOME to 988 from anywhere in the United States, anytime. I want to introduce our next writer, Janelle Theobald. She's an incoming sophomore at the International School of Beaverton, born developmental and physical disabilities, including autism, who is a Kid of the Year finalist for Time magazine. She's also an activist and writes about one of her efforts to battle racism and have an important Portland landmark be recognized. Hello. Would you read an excerpt from it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Although our country has become more and more inclusive, we all understand that there is no such thing as an ideal world. For around 10 years, the city I live in hasn't had any committee to serve people with disabilities. So another project I accomplished lately is successfully convincing my city to reinstate the ADA Advisory Committee. I am now serving on this board. Racism, xenophobia, and all the other isms and phobias will always be problems, at least for the foreseeable future. There will always be people who struggle with mental health. There will always be those groups of people that have it worse than everyone else. But the world is getting better every day, thanks to the people who keep bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Nowadays, people are generally understanding and accepting of those with physical disabilities, yet many don't realize that mental disabilities are just as disabling as physical disabilities. I know I will do my part to help spread awareness of this and continue to fight for those that are marginalized or left behind. Perhaps there is nothing I can do for my classmate, but I can help prevent future cases so that nothing like this happens again.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Your activism is super inspiring. Here's your certificate.
Thank you.
And would you like to tell us a little bit about Let's Peer Up, the nonprofit that you started?
Yeah. So I was born with several physical and mental disabilities, including autism. Because of this, I I always struggled to fit in socially. I was often bullied or just excluded. I attended many different therapists and counselors per week. And I also experienced depression. But because I had help from many people, I am getting better. And so I consider myself one of the lucky ones. However, there are many people who just don't get the help they need. And so they continue to suffer. And because of my experiences, I know what it's like to struggle with mental illness. So this gave me the resolve to help other people like me. And so I started a nonprofit organization called Let's Peer Up. We advocate for awareness and representation of people with disabilities. And yeah, one of our achievements, as I just read in the essay, was getting the city of Beaverton to instate the ADA Technical Advisory Committee. And we gave testimony in many different city council meetings. And every single time, there were many people who echoed our request, even though we were only kids. And even after the city agreed to our request, we continued to work with them to work out the details, and we even connected them to Jeffrey Dogan from the Massachusetts Office on Disability. And now we are working on expanding our reach so that we can continue to help even more people. Because we all know someone who is struggling with mental health, a friend, relative, classmate, neighbor, or someone else. So if you have the passion, then please join us.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You're good to go. Good job. As Janelle stated in her essay, racism and xenophobia have been with us for a long time. The Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism revealed that anti-Asian hate crime increased by 339% last year compared to the year before, with New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other cities surpassing their record numbers in 2020. Thanks so much for adding awareness to that. With us next is Veronica Sayron, who is a sophomore at Center Grove High School in Greenwood, Indiana. This is their first time publishing, and they continue to use writing to describe struggles with connective tissue disorder. Here's an excerpt of Veronica's poem, Bent and Broken.
The bed sinks as I lie, relieving the weight from the day. I lie awake with sparks in my skull and spines in my sides, wondering, weeping, whispering, what did I do to deserve this? Yelling out to any higher power, whoever is willing to listen to the bent and broken. Mornings full of mourning, longing for the life I once led, yet wanting to love the one I lead. Complications and confusion crowding my cranium. Is my brain bent and broken as well?
Hello, good day. My name is Veronica Sayron. I'm 15 years old. I'm from Greenwood, Indiana, and my piece is titled Bent and Broken. My inspiration for titling my piece is due to a repetition in my poem and really just how I feel sometimes about being disabled in a way that is hard to explain to other people. My disabilities are invisible, and sometimes people don't understand the struggles that come with that. It's hard for people to understand that even though I may look fine, I'm really not, and I tend to hide my pain through words or facial expressions or coping mechanisms, and I wrote about that in my piece. I wrote my piece around early 2022 or late 2021, and I was diagnosed in August 2021, so it kind of tied into the aftermath of all those feelings from my diagnosis, and I really think it helps me personally to write my thoughts and explain them so that maybe I can find validation in it or other people can find validation in what I've been through. And I just really hope that someone else feels happier knowing that other people understand what they're going through, and that's mainly why I wanted to share my piece.
That was Belong Salad. The Mental Health Coalition is decided to addressing the mental health needs of the BIPOC community. And we know that society's work is far from over in creating cultural informed quality mental health equity for all. For the urgent text support, reach out to Christ Text Line by texting Coalition to 741-741 to contact with a Christ counselor for free 24/7. Recently, I recorded a poem by my friend Nico Babuskovic. We are FAME students. FAME is a school here in Portland that teaches students with intellectual and developmental disabilities how to use the arts to express themselves. Nico graduated in high school of June of 2019. Nico uses his talents as a writer to communicate. He is a talented poet and writes monthly blog for Oregon Council on Developmental Disabilities. Here is the video of my recording of Nico's poem for the title ISM Youth Files podcast. This rain is the alarm I need on this first day after the holidays, when routines return and the world feels like nothing changed, except it did, somewhere between Christmas and New Year's. My great sense of calm was replaced with an urgency to fix and straighten everything I could. My OCD is a raging bull that wakes at dawn and doesn't relent until I fall asleep. The beast won't ever rest, even when I am exhausted. Its eyes are covered and caked in the stadium's dust. Even when I relax, the bull scrapes its hooves in preparation of a charge at any friendly face. It doesn't hear the fatigue in my father's voice or the fury in my sister's yell as she tries to interrupt my ritual. It gets enraged by their words that fall like blossoms from the 3 cherry trees that line our front yard every spring, dusting our cars in a festivity reminiscent of a Hindu wedding, then forgotten like a drunken argument between lovers. They eventually return to affection. But the bull keeps a tally of every spur thrust with bloodlust into the space between its shoulders, a pit so deep and rent with scars that blades don't penetrate. How many blades have tried? I know someday one will push its way into that gap where my OCD crawls up to sleep, and with a measured flick of the wrist, it will die, going slowly to a place where such things are buried, and I will no longer feel its intense hold on my life. Soon, in matter of time, if measured by billable hours, I will be free from all these unsinkable urges to let my decisions form like drops of rain and fall from the prettiest clouds. It's my pleasure to welcome Nico Babuskovic and his mom, Loretta. It's often difficult for youth with disabilities to receive help with mental health. We asked Nico to write a statement about what poetry means to him and the challenges of getting mental help as a youth with disabilities. Let's hear from Nico.
In my world, mental health is one of the main organizing loose cannons in my life. It rules each day, giving me structure and harmony when I need it. On the bad days when my OCD is really making my brain hurt, I'm reminded that neurodiverse people are the most resilient folks I know. I mean, if the world itself got too busy or loud for you, where would you try to find relief? The thing that has been the most challenging has been working around my anxiety and OCD. Think of it this way, being autistic can be hard, but there is usually a set way I experience my environment, and I have developed coping skills to try to understand it. Anxiety makes some of those responses illogical or irrelevant in a given situation, which then makes other people uncomfortable. It makes blending in impossible because these anxious reactions are neither quiet nor peaceful. So there are times when I am at a low point and suffering from a panic attack, and people are getting mad at me for it. Eventually, I was able to get access to a psychiatrist who finally put me on meds to manage my stress, but it took a really long time to find someone who would take me. I was 17 at the time, and there weren't pediatric psychiatrists who would take me because I was in that limbo stage of aging out of services for youth but too young to see an adult provider. Then there was the tricky bit about me being non-speaking for providers to mull over. It's not for everyone to deal with, and I needed to have a therapist who was patient and saw me as treatable. You might not know what I mean. A majority of non-speaking autistics are separated out from the general student population and segregated in self-contained classrooms with names like behavior classroom or communication behavior classroom. They often don't have a strong emphasis on academics, and by the time graduation rolls around, these students have fallen off the required courses track years earlier, and can only get a modified diploma or a certificate of attendance. I bring this up because this trajectory limits not only these autistic young adults, but it also keeps their peers and other teachers away and reinforces the separation of disabled people from the general population. This has been the status quo of our country for its entire history. The signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act changed that luckless fate for hundreds of thousands of Americans, but for those of us labeled as significantly disabled, we still don't have equal access to education, work, housing, and relationships, meaning that people have grown up never having had a disabled person in their classes or lives. They go to college, and if they're lucky, they might have a class or a lecture that references disability, but not even close to what should be taught about the largest minority group in this country. So our colleges and universities are churning out professionals who have had the disability experience omitted from conversation. My point is that when society erases and others you, it's no wonder that services are reluctant to serve you even if you need them as much as or more than a non-disabled person. It's not hard to imagine all the phone calls that my mom made explaining patiently that I was non-speaking and autistic but used a letterboard to communicate, only to never hear back from the provider's office. So when I finally got in to see my current psychiatrist and found a caring, patient, and informative person, it immediately made my anxiety levels go down. I felt seen in good light instead of with dark shadows around my name. Treatment has been good in general, and I finally am on an anxiety medication which is helping me feel less anxious, and I am finally getting occupational therapy to help me learn how to de-escalate in times of growing stress. I think this is likely to be a part of my mental health that I will have to deal with for the rest of my life. I used to retreat into my thoughts when the world got too loud and confusing, and these limits are still bogging me down. So now I create poems in my head about all sorts of things in my life, my relationship with my family, being disabled and specifically non-speaking, how society treats marginalized people, history, and its influencing trends on how we choose to see each other's humanity, and nature, because we are, after all, just another species living on Earth along with millions of other species which rely on coexisting together. I would write poems all day if I could, and nature would be in every one.
Oh, thank you, Nico. That was a wonderful statement. Do you have anything to say about your statement?
Mama Lalapa.
Okay, let's go. Is there anything you want to ask?
Mama Lalapa.
Okay, what do you want to say?
Ika Lalapa. Ika Lalapa.
Thank you. For this. Hello.
Mama Lalapa.
Get it. Thank you for this lovely. Oh. This lovely opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Nico.
Let's hear it for all the writers of the ISM Youth Files. The ebook will be available this fall. Visit MediaRites.org and sign up for the newsletter or join the MediaRites Facebook page. Today we have the Mental Health Toolkit available free. Just take a photo of the QR code or go to MediaRites or Oregon Children's Theater websites. We're going to take a short break as we get ready for the Words of Wellness panel moderated by my mom, Eleanor Gill Kashiwabara. She'll be joined by Desiree Bansali, Joseph Barron of the Children's Program, and Rebecca Cohen, West Sylvan School Counselor. We'll be back in a few moments. Don't go away. Mic off.
Children, please slow down. Slow down. I know. I know you know. I'm hoping that this world will change, but it just seems the same. You can feel it in the streets. On a day like this, the heat, it feels like summer. I feel like summer. I feel like summer. Every day gets harder than the one before. Running out of water, it's about to go down.
me spell it out for you. All of the feelings that I got for you can't be explained, but I can try for you. Yeah, baby, don't make me spell it out for you. You keep on asking me the same questions and second guessing all my intentions. Should know by the way I use my compression that you got the answers to my confessions. It's like I'm powerful with a little bit of tender and emotional sexual bender. Mess me up, yeah, but no one does it better. There's nothing better. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. So good, so good, so good, so real. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. You know I love you, so please don't stop it. You got me right here in your jean pocket, laying your body on the shag carpet. Oh, you know I love you, so please don't stop it. It's like I'm powerful with a little bit of tender and emotional sexual bender. Mess me up, yeah, but no one does it better. There's nothing better. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. So good, so good, so good, so real. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way that I feel now, baby. Goodbye, I can't help it. Hey, that's just the way that I feel. Yeah, please, I can't help it. It's like I'm powerful with a little bit of tender and emotional sexual bender. Mess me up, yeah, but no one does it better. There's nothing better. Damn, that's just the way you make me feel.
It's raffle time. Everybody got their raffle tickets in? Yeah? Okay. Just got one half though, remember? Okay. Yep, keep yours. Did you just put in yours? No, you're not supposed to put yours in. Yeah, we have the other half. Yeah. I just say, did everybody turn in their surveys for the raffle tickets? Okay. Okay, one more. You guys did great. He's such a powerful player. Okay. All right, are you ready? Yeah. We just have this little gift bag, okay?
3 of them.
Yeah, 3 of them. All right. So, what's that?
Last 3 numbers are 664.
664. Going once. 664. Going twice. Your tickets. 664. Going 4 times. Okay, maybe they're in the back. Hold on to it just in case. Okay, let's do number 2. Sorry.
Last numbers are 669.
669. 669. Oh, winner! All right. Okay, let's do this one. Here you go.
673.
Everybody likes the way down.
Thank you.
So one last time for this one, which is 664. No? Okay.
One more.
All right, here you go.
Okay. 663.
Right here.
Oh.
Well, thank you all. How exciting was that? All right. So we're about to start the panel soon. So thank you for all for sticking around. I'm so inspired by these youth. I can't tell you. I cry every time I hear their pieces and read their pieces. So you guys are wonderful.
My
writes, the ISM Youth Files event was a wellness. We want to thank Oregon Humanities for supporting this talk today. I am Femina Lopez.
And I'm Lulu Kashiwabara.
And I'm Olivia Chisire. We're so grateful to be here today, sharing these stories and furthering the conversations to destigmatize mental health.
Youthline is just one organization that's been helping in the work. Youthline is free, teen-to-teen crisis support and helpline.
A few of their volunteers were gracious enough to share their experiences through the medium of digital storytelling. We'd like to share just one of those stories with you now.
My skin is blush pink with love when I hear her. My body is pulled by cellular connections to the other side of the world where she hurts with her heartbreak. My ears tell me that our pain is a symbiotic relationship. I know I am the sad kid I support on this hotline as she shatters against the speaker of her phone. My skin is blush pink with love when I hear her. My mind suffocates from the pain of what I cannot bear on my own a year later. My ears tell me that our pain is a symbiotic relationship. I know I am the sad kid I support on this hotline as she shatters against the speaker of her phone. You should know that she lives in my heart. She's the clockmaster of my self-love, climbing the tower that forces me to rest and reset.
And others like it are available to view by downloading the ISM Youth Files Mental Health Toolkit, which you can do by scanning the QR code on your table or at the front desk.
Some new workshops are offering youth the opportunity to create our digital stories in a new workshop. The workshops are not only free, but all youth will receive a stipend.
If you're interested, please email us at MediaRitesPro@gmail.com. You can also visit the digital stories at octc.org/youthline.
And now we want to introduce our moderator, Dr. Eleanor Gail Kashiwabara, is the mental health consultant for the ISM Youth Files. She has a licensed psychologist at the Luminosa Psychological Services in Portland.
Her training and professional experience has focused on children, families, especially those who have expected international trauma, historical loss, and trauma. She also works with mental health agencies and schools to provide trainings and correlations on how to approach the work in ways that cultural approach for BIPOC youth.
And now, please give a warm welcome for our moderator, Dr. Eleanor Gail Kashiwabara, and our panelist, Desiree Bamsaleh of Youth Era, Joseph Barron of Children's Program, and Rebecca Cohen, West Sylvan School Counselor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eleanor Hill Kashiwabara, and I'm excited to be here today for this wonderful panel, and really honored, especially after hearing all of the presentations today that were so wonderful from all of the youth writers. So it's an honor to be here. And we only have about 30, 40 minutes, so we're just going to jump right in. And I'd like to start with introducing our panelists. Our first panelist is Desiree Bamsaleh, and she hails from Maplewood, New Jersey, but moved to Portland in 2016. And in her life, Desiree has overcome abuse, abandonment by her biological father, PTSD, bullying, depression, and coming out as a member of the LGBT+ community. She works full-time at Youth Era and is a trainer for peer counselors, but also works with Wraparound and Peer Plus, doing trainings for youth peer support. She also created Adulting IRL, which is called #IRL and contracted through Portland Public Schools. welcome, Desiree. And I also have to share that when we were connecting around this panel, we realized that we were both from the same community in New Jersey, and we actually both graduated from the same high school. So I feel a bond, and I've only recently met Desiree, so it's really lovely to have that connection, in addition to our passion for youth mental health. So welcome to the panel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
And next, we have Dr. Joseph Barron, and Joseph currently works at the Children's Program here in Portland, Oregon, and received his doctorate from the University of Texas at Austin, which is also his hometown where he was born and raised. And there he gained specialized experience and knowledge working in systems of education, outpatient mental health care, residential and milieu care, and engaged in all of this while also conducting community-based participatory research with Spanish-speaking families, which is a form of research where communities and academics and providers work as equal partners to address a community-driven, a community-identified need. And so it's really a culturally responsive model, an activism model for conducting research to propel work within communities. So it's awesome that you were doing that while also working in those care environments. So as in the last few years in his postdoctoral residency and now as a licensed psychologist, he's been working to support families, workers, and children in the child welfare system. And I had the honor of getting to work with Joseph in a mental health agency setting and got to see his approach in conducting culturally responsive work and really meeting families who are diverse and utilizing approaches that are respond to both their mental health needs as well as their cultural values. So welcome, Joseph. And next, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Cohen, who is a West Sylvan School counselor, West Sylvan Middle School in Portland, Oregon. And she went to college at University of Kansas and received a Master's of Science in Special Education from the University of Oregon, and also a Master's of Arts in School Counseling from Pacific University. And she's served as a counselor in a variety of schools over the past 2 decades, including Title I, dual language immersion, private boarding schools, public K through 5 middle schools and high schools, and even as the director of disability for Reed College. I have had the personal pleasure, of knowing Rebecca's work because she was a counselor at my daughter's elementary school a few years ago, and have witnessed her skill with utilizing mindfulness approaches in the classroom and with kids, and the use of those techniques with the kids in the school. And so welcome, Rebecca. It's an honor to have you on the panel as well. So I will get us started, but I first just wanted to share that, again, we really were mindful about choosing panelists from different settings, peer support, mental health agency care, and school, so that, although all of the providers are working with youth and families, they represent different perspectives because of the environments that they interface with and where they see kids. So I'm really excited to get their perspectives. And before we get started, what I'm going to do is ask each panelist a question that's really specific to their area, but I want to make sure that we also hopefully have time to get response or questions from the audience answered. And so for those of you who are watching live stream, you can also participate in submitting a question by putting your question into the comments box, and then someone from our MediaRites team here will make sure if there's time, that we have the opportunity to answer your questions as well as in the audience too. I think there are cards floating around, and you can provide D-May with your question if you have one, and we'll do our best in the time we have to answer some of those questions. That being said, our hope today, as you could see from all of the wonderful works that were presented, is for this audience, for our audience, the youth and families, to come away with a feeling of hope, a feeling that it's important to talk about mental health so that we can destigmatize mental health, and for everyone to know that there are resources, there are tools, and that is our hope, is that by having this panel and this opportunity to talk with our provider panel, that there is some sense of what is available and some sense of hope and the feeling that you're not alone. And so with that, we'll get started, and I want to provide my first question to Desiree. I'm going to move my mic closer. Desiree or Des, I want to ask you, as we noticed in our pieces today, we had some youth bring up suicide, the importance about talking about suicide and how we talk about suicide behaviors and thinking. And that was something in our panel preparation talk. We talked with Des about the fact that that's something that Des has had a lot come up with the youth that she works with, and as a youth peer counselor, trainer rather. So I would, counselor and trainer. So I would love to ask you to maybe talk a little bit about some of the tools you provide in your peer counselor trainings related to helping young people engage in healthy wellness practices and strategies that allowed them to work through difficult experiences, including suicidal thoughts and behaviors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eleanor. So I think the biggest and best strategy that we have as peer counselors is providing a holistic view of what's really going on with our young folks that are coming into our services. So we try to not only look at just the mental health aspect, but their whole overall wellness. And we approach it from a standpoint of every behavior is stemming from an unmet need that these young people are having. So we really work to talk with them around figure out what that unmet need is. And then if we can provide them with alternatives on how to meet that need in a way that's healthier for them, then eventually these self-harming behaviors and suicide behaviors will end. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. That being said, at Adulting IRL specifically, we have our #IRL series, which teaches young folks how to embrace their authentic selves. And we do that by, first of all, helping them connect to their identity, who they are, and understanding that who they are is all that they need to know, and that's all that really matters, and they don't have to conform to what society expects them to be. And from there, we teach them how to heal from different types of trauma that they may have. And we teach them, how to really flip the script on some of those negative and intrusive thoughts that get into their brains that tells them that they aren't worthy. We teach them how to do the opposite and start to have more positive self-image and more positive self-love language. And then once we have done that step with them, we then teach them that they are worth being taken care of. So we teach them how to do intentional self-care and wellness practices, not just your typical, I feel down, so I'm going to take a bubble bath, but really exploring their feelings language and what they need depending on what feeling you're feeling. And once we get them to a point where they feel like they can have that self-awareness, that self-love back in their lives and rebuild their strength and power, we then put the cherry on top by teaching them how to set realistic, achievable goals, how to have conversations in a collaborative way so that if something's coming up for them, they have the language to be able to say, this is what's happening for me, and this is what I need in this moment. And I've been doing that program in the Portland Public School for 2 years now. And this will be our third coming up. And it's gotten so big that they eventually asked us to make a parent guide to help their students parents now be able to reinforce some of these lessons at home. And the other thing that we decided to do to help young people is we recognize that young people are hearing first from their friends when they're having thoughts of suicide and suicide behaviors or self-harming. So I'm an ASSIST trainer. ASSIST stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. And so I adapted that training to create a training specifically for youth and young adults to be able to learn how to do a first aid suicide intervention with their friends so that they can keep safe for now and then get in contact with your therapists and your school counselors and things like that. Because that's been the number one ask is, how do I help my friends? So I ended the gatekeeping and say, this is how you do it.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And I'm familiar with that ASSIST training and often was used with teachers and adults, but I think it's incredible that it's been expanded to use with peers, because I think exactly a lot of times peers are learning from their friends about their suicidal ideation. So I believe that this information is linked in the toolkit, but if it's not, I'm sure that we will make sure that our audiences have that information. And thank you, Desiree. That's really wonderful work that you're doing. I'm going to, just since we want to hear from all of our panelists as well, this is really great. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you a question next. As a school counselor, and since you're based in the school setting, can you share about the resources available to kids at school? I know that some of our youth writers talked about, what's available or not available at school. How can kids get help at school and feel supported?
We have so many more resources than we ever have had in schools. I mean, Des just talked about that resource, but we have school social workers, we have volunteers coming in, and then we have like a big rise in affinity groups and clubs, and really we're trying to wrap around students in a way that so no one feels alone. So like in my school, we have started a 5-day-a-week advisory program where students will get social emotional learning, but also be able to connect with their peers, like you said, about some of the things that are happening for them, and talk about their identity, talk about who they are, talk about mental health. We celebrate Mental Health Awareness Week. We really are trying to open it up so that every student in a school feels seen and heard and loved. And I can speak for myself, and I walk into a room with 200 counselors in Portland Public Schools, and I can promise that it is the most loving space I know. Like our social workers, our school psychologists, all of the care people want to help youth. And so there's that and beyond, because we also make a ton of referrals. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And I think, I don't know if this is new, but I think there's also the ability to connect kids with therapy in the schools now.
We have therapists in our schools. Not only that, but we will also, since the pandemic, provide space so that if a student has a mental health provider that they're seeing online, we will provide space for them. Like there is no end to what we will do to help a student. And we go into classrooms right at the beginning of the year and talk about mental health and suicide awareness, so that every child knows that if they hear it from a friend, there's people to talk to. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And my next question is for you, Joseph. As a provider in a mental health agency, can you share about therapy, the benefits of therapy, and also what goes into finding a therapist? I know some people use the term therapy shopping, and some of our writers have talked about their experiences in therapy and the importance of either connecting to a therapist who's a good fit culturally or otherwise. So anything that you can tell us about therapy and fit of a therapist. We know that there is much more need for diversity among therapists, and so if that's not available, how can a youth feel a connection?
I really appreciate that I'm going third because, I think mental health is so many things. And of course, you do have the community resource piece, and then you have the school collective piece. And so the therapy part is really the individual work, right? So that's the once a week or once a month or twice a month moment where you're connecting with another adult and you're having an opportunity to be heard and listened to. And the great thing about therapy is that there's so many different kinds of therapy and different orientations, different theoretic modalities. And so it is beautiful to be able to find the person that speaks to your needs. And there's some therapists that do more talking and build more insight and take more of a long form approach. And there's some therapists that do more behavioral work, so they're actually going to have you go do things, and they're going to assign homework and some sort of thought reviewing and really connecting with you on week-to-week kinds of actions and objectives that you're trying to work through. And some therapists are just going to be delving into your past, into your dreams, into things that are not clear. And all of that is great because you get to decide what kind of therapist works for you. And your parents can go alongside you with those sessions, and sometimes there's family work to be done. And so it's really a beautiful opportunity to be able to work through things through a variety of modalities. And Eleanor, I think you're totally right. There is a difficulty sometimes with especially youth of color, youth with disabilities, to find therapists that do specialize in their particular backgrounds or know how to broach the conversation of race. And I think the reality is a lot of therapists aren't trained in that, and they don't have that sort of background in their training programs, depending on what city they were in or what was the orientation or ideas in those graduate programs. But I think it's about us as a community also being able to talk to the therapist, and we can even directly ask. You have the right to ask, what is your stance on this or that? Are you BIPOC affirming? Are you LGBTQ affirming? How much work have you done with people on the spectrum? And I think all those are valid questions, and as therapists, we need to be ready to provide the correct response and then provide the right type of technique and engagement for those youth.
Thank you. I'm just looking at my watch to be mindful of the time that we have left. I don't know if any questions have come forth. I have other questions, but I just wanted to give the audience a chance. I know that if there are, if not, I can ask my next questions. Or even on the YouTube, on the virtual. If not, I have more questions. Okay, I will go ahead and ask my next questions. So I also had some questions around, I guess since Joseph, you just spoke, maybe I'll kind of go in reverse here and start with you. To add to what you were just talking about, do you have anything to share with the audience around mental health stigma, stigma and how to address that, especially in some communities of color? There may be more, and some of our youth writers spoke to that, just stigma in accessing services or trying to get services. Do you have any things to share with our audience around that?
Yeah, I think it's important to honor that different communities have come to interface with this idea that we call mental health in their own ways. And I always like to bring in the conversation of primary and secondary characteristics here, which is to say a lot of communities of color, primarily we have certain ideas and values and sensibilities, and those are sort of our primary characteristics. And sometimes whenever we come and interact with sort of the wider dominant hegemony, then we start to develop secondary characteristics, which is to say maybe I hide certain things, maybe I don't talk about certain things, maybe I veer away certain things because I need to be strong and put together. And so what I often help my patients engage in is the idea of what were those primary characteristics. So if you're a Latinx person, we actually know that if you delve deep enough into the history, you see tribal leaders, you see different people who were part of indigenous Latin communities doing mental health work with other language. And there's this really wonderful system and charts if you go into sort of the history of what it looked like back then. And so I always encourage people to go back and say, well, even if your community currently seems to disengage with it or mock it or not understand it or feel scared of it, what other stories are in your community that actually point to, no, we've always taken care of ourselves. We found ways to connect and to belong, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's talking with your grandma, whether it's listening to consejos and stories and things like that. What are the ways that we have engaged in mental health, even if we called it something else? So I think that's really important to delve into your roots and the richness there.
Yeah, I love that, making that connection, but and just making the connection like we're talking about some of these same things, just using different language or ways of engaging. Wonderful, thank you. And then, Rebecca, I wanted to ask about advocacy and just, is the school, in your opinion, or are you seeing things change around opportunities for mental health advocacy within school?
Absolutely. I see funding changing, and I see our district putting more money towards helping with mental health in schools. And I also see us training up teachers to be able to respond and training our students to be able to respond to each other. So I think that we are very aware about, that the pandemic caused crisis, and I see us bringing in many more services. Like, for example, all of the high schools have a mindfulness class. So that is like, tier 1 on the floor, like how can we help, on the court, how can we help kids right from the start gain these skills? So I just see more and more opportunity all the time. I don't know, is that, Janae, is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, definitely. What I'm seeing as well, Portland Public School came to me and said, hey, this is what we're seeing in our schools. We know you do this in the community. Can you bring something like this to us? And there's been a real push to get peer supports, youth peer supports specifically, who have lived experience in navigating a lot of these systems and dealing and going through some of those challenging times that our young people are facing. Portland Public School is saying we need those folks in our schools to be available for our young people to talk to. So if there's one thing I can say is about this school district in particular, is that there is a huge focus on mental health and wellness for our young people. And I'm proud to say that I am a part of that.
That's wonderful. Oh.
Can I share one other little thing that I know has happened, that schools are having mental health days at schools where they're bringing in all different types of mental health opportunities, which I think does raise advocacy for students, whether it's like they're teaching kids how to craft or, make things, create writing, have pets. All of this stuff that we bring in also shows to the outside world, like, this is okay, we all need this. We all need this self-care, so.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a question from the audience, so thank you for whoever submitted this question. And I think this could be for anyone on the panel. What do you do to help your friends if you think they need help? So this is, again, that peer-to-peer thing, and I'm sure in all of the environments we're experiencing this. Does anyone want to speak to this question?
I guess I will.
Does.
I think the biggest thing you can do for a friend that needs help is to let them know that you are here for them, validate their feelings, because even though you might not know the exact situation or you might not have experienced that exact thing, chances are the feeling that they're feeling, you've experienced it as well. So by first and foremost, just validating that for them and letting them know that they're not alone in that experience will help tremendously. And once they understand that, then that kind of opens up the opportunity for you to say, hey, I'm really concerned because this is not how you normally are. And then you could ask them. And that's one of the things we teach students, especially our older, like middle school and high school students. We actually teach them how to ask if their friend is thinking about suicide, because it's such an awkward question. It's literally the worst question to get a yes to. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety around asking that question. So we teach them how to ask it and what to do if the response is yes. And the first and foremost thing you could do is acknowledge it and say, I hear you, tell me what's going on. And then make a plan with them to keep them safe in that moment until you can connect them to a school counselor or a therapist or an organization like Youth Era, where an adult can now take over for you and help get them to where they need to be.
Thank you, Des.
Yep.
I have another question here, and this is in the space of advocacy, so I'm not sure. We'll ask the question and would love to hear anyone's thoughts. Mental health is such a serious issue. Since the pandemic started, Colorado has passed 8 laws regarding mental health. Oregon has passed none. Do you know of any opportunities to get involved with legislators? Looks like
Yes.
Des.
So yes, there's lots of opportunity locally and throughout the state and even federally. The best opportunity, I would say, is the systems of care. It's where you can go and actually talk to folks who are sending out the money, creating the policy, doing all these things. So you have education is represented, behavioral health, mental health, juvenile justice, intellectual and developmental disabilities, early education. All of these fields who work in collaboration with young people get together once a month at a practice level work group where we identify the needs in the community. And then we get together at a regional advisory where community members and managers and directors of these programs try to figure out how can we meet those needs. And if all else fails, we send it up to what's called the executive council, where the folks with like the money can come in and say, we're gonna put X amount of dollars to help solve this problem. So if you want your voice to be heard, the best place to go is to a system of care event.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we have 5 minutes left. So I think the next question I wanted to ask, and actually, I know that Desiree, you've been answering some of the audience questions, but this is actually for anyone. I just think because we had a conversation about this, but I think this applies to all of us. In talking with youth about wellness, I know that that was a theme that I saw or I heard as we watched the writings. This idea of wellness as a journey and not kind of a destination. I'd love to hear our panelists' thoughts on wellness and how do we talk to our youth and our families about wellness.
You all want me to go first?
Anyone?
Okay. So what I try to impart on youth about wellness is that it's a lifelong journey. You're never going to stop being well. And so there's going to be times when one part of your life is more well than another part of your life, and that's okay. And what I try to do is help youth learn these skills and develop these skills so that when one part of their life isn't doing so good, they have an opportunity to say, this is what I need to change it, this is what I have to do to fix it. And then they can put an intentional focus on that particular part. But just understanding that it's a lifelong journey that everyone in this room has to take. It's not just you or myself or Eleanor or my lovely panelists here. We all have that journey, and being able to talk about it openly and honestly with our friends and our family members is what makes that journey easier.
I really love this question because I think when it comes, so the idea of mental health again is, you know, as we're trained in our graduate programs, our modern day graduate programs, it really does come from a very empirical Western mindset. But again, when we start turning away from that that conversation into sort of more of the margins, again, some communities, some indigenous communities, for example, in Canada, don't have like that same sort of paradigm of mental health, but there's a term called being well, right? And that is something that, as humans, you know, is a construct that we can try to tap into and work through. And in my work in therapy, I often have families come in and we'll do like 10 to 20 sessions, and we'll really target something, and then I'll send them out, and I'll let them keep going on with your life and connecting with resources in the community or your school supports or other people that really care about you. And if you need more help, then come back and let's do more of the therapy specialization work. But taking care of who you are is something that you do day to day, and you do week to week, and you do in conjunction with family. So being part of a collectivist sort of mindset, myself, I think that is, it's about tapping again into your roots, into the things around you that you love. And I think that is just an ongoing dynamic that helps you grow and to change and transform. And yeah, I love that we're having conversations about being well. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Any thoughts?
I can just add that we start young with our students in schools, kindergarten, right on up, about like the whole student and trying to help them understand, whether it's through eating or exercise or talking to a friend or talking to an adult, all of the parts that make us feel well in the world, gratitude, all of those things, breathing. So we try to start really young, and so that by the time students get older, those are just part of their way of being, and knowing that they can fall back on themselves to really depend on taking care of what's happening inside of them.
Yeah, I love that very holistic mind, body, and community approach to being well. So we could, I'm sure, talk a lot longer, but we're out of time. So I want to close our panel, which I'm sad to close, but all good things have to wrap. I want to make sure again to thank our funders and give a special thank you to Oregon Humanities for providing this forum to discuss these issues for the ISM Youth Project. It's so very important to have these conversations, and thank you. And thank you again to our panel and to our writers. Thank you.
Thanks to all the panelists. As we close this event, we want to remind you that MediaRites is in the process of publishing the ebook of youth writings.
But today we are debuting the mental health toolkit we created in collaboration with Oregon Children's Theater. Those are available at the QR code in the program and at the MediaRites.org and OCTC.org.
The Mental Health Toolkit is free and has helpful information about resources for youth, families, schools, and community groups.
And stay tuned to MediaRites for the debut of the ebook that broadcast will launch later this year.
We want to leave you with this quote: "Wellness is not a state of being, but a state of action."
If it is the freedom to move fluidly
through the experience of being human,
thanks for joining us for the ISM Youth Files, Words of Wellness.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. We would like for you to bring their certificates on stage.
I'm available.
I didn't even know, like, I didn't know.
Can you help taking
yes.
Will you do middle school?
I do all the way down to